Welcome to Our Drummers Musicians, a captivating journey through Melbourne's vibrant music scene. Recorded on a cosy couch in Brunswick, join us as we explore what it truly means to be a musician and speak to the diverse talents that make music in our city. Today, on our very first episode, we're excited to be sitting down with Greg Arnold, an ARIA winner and iconic figure of folk rock in Melbourne. Greg is widely celebrated for his hit Happy Birthday Helen with his band Things of Stone and Wood, and he's maintained a successful career as a musician across decades. Not only a talented singer and songwriter, Greg is also a producer, author, and holds a PhD in songwriting. His work is deeply interwoven with the cultural fabric of Melbourne, and his music continues to resonate with audiences locally and around the world. We're privileged to have Greg, who's just finished touring his latest album, In the Sky, across Europe, the UK, and Australia. We'll be discussing his latest creative projects, exploring his reflections on societal change, and delving into the enduring legacy of his contributions to the music world. We want to take a moment to acknowledge the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung people of the Kulin Nation as the traditional custodians of the land on which this podcast was recorded. We pay our respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. Hey, welcome to the podcast, Greg.
Thank you, Luke.
Oh, no worries. Thanks so much for coming on. It's so nice to, have you in this place here in Brunswick and get to chat about your music.
Oh, thanks for having me. Great.
Part of the concept of this podcast is about, our drummers musicians. What is a musician to you?
Well, I mean, that's a very interesting thing. It's kind of good provocation, that particular question. So I'll get that one out of the way early. Yeah. Yes. And I think it's really important within this, particularly if you come from a world of bands and things like that. It is really important, I think, to sort of acknowledge the gestalt of a band and the band that everyone's putting in. And that's what makes the sound in its entirety. And I think, a classic risk that I understand how it happens, particularly in all eras where the top line is so valued within music. Those other sonic and groove and participatory part aspects that go to making up an album often do get a little overlooked. So are drummers musicians? Yes, they are. Everyone in the band is a musician.
Yeah. So how does it work, Greg, with you? Like, you've played with quite a lot of different drummers. Like Tony Floyd's been the drummer in Things of Stone and Wood, but with your solo albums, you've had like different drummers on different albums, and sometimes you're playing solo, sometimes it's with a band. How do you go about choosing, when it's you versus when it's other musicians, and, how do you pick which ones you want to come in and play your music?
Well, it's been an interesting thing. I suppose the three drummers with my own music that I've worked with the most in the studio would be Tony, of course, with Things of Stone and Wood. Ian Kitney, who is a fantastic drummer. He's now currently a farmer in Japan, but also making great records there in his home studio. I made records with him a lot of the period after sort of Things of Stone and Wood stopped touring, and he'd played with Tim Rogers and a great band called Overnight Jones, and also played with the Black Sorrows for a little while there. And right. And he too is a fantastic drummer. I think in all the cases, and the third drummer I've spent a lot of time working with is Steph Rule in Switzerland, and he's a French session drummer, but he spent most of his time drumming through the sort of studio system and the touring system of the late 80s all the way through to the early 2000s in the UK.
Wow.
Was his world. But I think the thing that unites all three of them, even though they're very different in their style, is that they're so musical. Like they just respond to the music. There's, they hear the song and they do their take of the song. Much in the same way as if you were handing it to a singer. If I wasn't the singer, they do their interpretation of it. And while the kick's often on one, the snare's often on two. There's still a lot of infinite possibilities for interpretation of that just minute moment.
Yeah, so how does that come in? We were talking the other day about, how with copyright, you really only have lyrics and music, lyrics and melody. for like copyright of
that
music.
is the traditional, real hard line of copyright. It has moved on from that, I think, thankfully. I mean, I suppose in songwriting, if I was to be really definite about my own taste or how I value songs, a core song to me, I do find it hard to remove chord progressions from that. But in the strictest sense of the word, they are. And you can see why that's possible. You could reharmonise an entire song. It would still be the same song if it had the same lyrics and the same melody. But having said that, I always use the example of Yesterday by the Beatles. It's obviously an extraordinary melody, but it's when you put that extraordinary melody against that beautiful chord progression that is, to me, what hits me about Yesterday. And in that particular case, the lyrics serve possibly a lesser function in my reaction to it, compared to, say, a Bob Dylan song where, I'd be drawn in by, like, Hard Rain. It's really that lyric. I'm drawn in by that and I enjoy the rest of it, but I'm there with that lyric.
I was thinking, like, preparing for this, like, you've got quite an interesting mix of being this, folk rock artist, but also, like, you have a PhD in songwriting and, you've done a lot of, like, academic study. How much, do you lean into both sides of that, or do you keep them separate and just put your academic hat on in that world, and in the studio it's something different, or are they constantly intertwining?
Well, they are constantly intertwining, and I think that was when I first went into my PhD, I was really nervous about looking at it. I suppose a bit of a hippie, bit of a romantic, and I was worried that if you look at this thing, it'll disappear like a leprechaun or something, like it'll be some mystical little thing that, don't look at it too closely. And I found that to absolutely not be the case. That, I mean, the album that was attached to my PhD was an album called Fall by the Swamp Dandies. And that, that was a real thing where I looked at it really closely, looked at everything I did, looked at every lyric, every melody, every chord move, all the band arrangements, production sounds, and the whole things, and it didn't make it any less beautiful to me to have a look at that and understand it and see it. Nor did it make things disappear. Creativity didn't disappear from that. There's a lot of work in the creativity thing, and understanding the way that functions doesn't mean it disappears. So having said that, I like to bring that to all my academic work, because that's the outcome of my academic work. And I bring the analysis of what I'm doing, and sort of always did, in the studio. There's so much time in the studio is this exciting, like, wow, what happened then? Amazing. Let's go down that path. Then a lot of it's just maths, really. You're sort of just following the direction, doing parts. You go, this serves a function. I'm not feeling like overwhelmed by inspiration at the moment. I'm doing a job to make this work at that point.
So do you have any other academic projects coming up now that In the Sky's out? Like, do you rotate between a creative and an academic project?
Well, I teach a little bit here and there still, and I really enjoy going back to that, and particularly to songwriting, to the core thing. As part of the academic process, I also talked about production as how that pertains from a more creative thing, I suppose, less talking about, let's take 5 dB off, 1.2K, or, which was funny when I did the PhD. When I'd speak to anyone in the sort of the mastering engineers or the mixing engineers or thing, they never really talked about that stuff either. They talked big picture. Yeah, right. Interesting. Subject, focus of subject against background, all those kind of, very, so they're on the same creative journey, and it was great. So nothing specific to do with the thing, although I am tempted. Things of Stone and Wood has sort of got this half-finished album, and I can't help but think the title of my book that came out from my PhD was What Was I Thinking? And What Were We Thinking? Wouldn't make for a bad academic project, I don't think, really. Just seeing what people are thinking. I mean, that was the foundation of the conclusions, was to just go, well, what were people thinking when they're doing that? For example, I do a lot of work with John Bedgood, known as Bedgie, around Melbourne, and we've worked together for years, and he has this great approach where he sort of wants to hear my melodic ideas and goes, well, what do you what are you hearing happening there? And then he sort of bedgifies it, but it brings an authenticity to it. You know, as James Black, the producers, often said to me, you know, with so many of my melodies, they sound very composed, very written music.
Yes.
It's great to have someone interpret them and
right.
make them bring a different language to those same series of notes.
Yeah, wow. That's interesting. And I guess like you've worked with so many different people that, you know, you gravitate towards those ones that are doing it in an interesting way or that, you know, excites you in their interpretation of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's fun. I mean, I have spent a lot of this last year touring by myself. And while it's very rewarding building a big sound with one person, it's not as much fun. It's a lot more fun making music with other people.
Yeah. Well, I definitely agree. That's why I like playing music. I never really enjoyed, you know, practicing alone for hours and hours when I was at uni. It was just, you know, the chance to play in ensembles or play in bands or, you know, it's the interactions with the other people that I loved, not so much the solo
and
time.
that makes a moment. And that's that, you know, creative moment amongst a collective of people is a beautiful thing.
Yeah. So the Old Things of Stone and Wood album that's not finished, is that like something recently that you guys recorded, or is that an old one from the vault?
No, we started work on it about 2018. I had this amazing time when I lived in Switzerland for 8 years, and for the first 2 years of that, I just didn't write anything. I remember being kind of, oh well, songwriting. That was a thing I used to do. You know, I just thought like that's all over.
Yep.
And then at the end of that second year period, something happened and just the floodgates, just song after song after song, more songs in a short period of time than I've ever written in my life.
Okay.
And from that came this Things of Stone and Wood album. But then we sort of partially recorded that, got to a certain point, and then, of course, COVID made things different. And also I think some bands are less suited to that sort of remote working, you know, I'll send you a file, you send me a file, that kind of thing.
Yes.
And Things of Stone and Wood by its nature was more of a band. And I think trying to work out how to get back into that space, it would certainly make for a very interesting, I hope it makes for a great album. And it would certainly make for an interesting read.
Yeah. Oh, well, both sound very interesting. And I don't know, like the band's been going on for so long. You know, I saw you guys for the first time when you did I think it was the 25-year reunion, the sold-out gig at the Corner Hotel. And that was amazing because, you know, I've been around you guys from the family for quite some time, but I'd never seen an actual Things of Stone and Wood gig. And that was just spectacular to be like, oh, okay, I'm here at the Corner Hotel, it's sold out, there's all these people that sing along to every word of every song, like the music's connecting with people. You guys are so talented in, you know, the songs that you make and performing as a band. It's so, you know, engaging and exciting. It was really special. And, you know, I didn't see you back in the 90s when you guys first put out your album. But, you know, the music seems to be just as impactful now, and awesome that you're like still making music with those same guys, even though COVID sort of paused it. But, you know, it's been a long time, but you guys are still together, not a band that's, you know, been torn apart or split up after, you know, an early success. Yeah,
well, it's been an interesting journey. We've certainly had periods where people have come and gone a little across that time. But, I mean, for 35 years to still, you know, we did a gig with the original lineup just a couple of months ago, and it was absolutely fantastic. Funny thing is, too, it's just muscle memory. You just know. You know, that thing I was talking about, the nuance of where you land on beat 1 and 2.
Yep.
We're all kind of locked in on that. We, you know, years and years of touring.
Yep. So does the band
pace?
Do you guys practice, or do you just call the songs?
No, we don't practice at all.
Okay.
Which is
that's great.
Really fun.
Yeah, I bet.
We sort of, I find that interesting. We've got a piano trio version of the band coming up in a couple of nights, actually. And it's the most I think I've practiced for a specific gig in years.
Okay.
Well, ever, maybe, for a specific show. Primarily because I have to change the entire set to the piano rather than the guitar, and that's not without a few thrills. Okay.
Is it a completely different vibe? Like you're reworking the songs?
Yeah, well, they're sort of automatically reworked by the fact you're the core instrument is different. And so many things that I would do unthinkingly on the guitar, if you do them on the piano, like I love the suspended fourth chord, but it's a lot stronger a statement on the piano than it is on the guitar.
Yeah, right.
And it can be can get very middle of the road very fast if you don't, so I'm looking at that and go, easy, tiger.
Okay. Hold back. When you're practicing for these gigs, do you have like a process, like, when you go into practice mode, or is it, this is so unique, like, because you don't normally practice your songs, that, I don't know, there's no like rhythm or like a certain way that you sit down to practice?
Sorry, are you referring to me, myself, or the band?
Yeah, you, like, I don't know, when you put on Greg's practice hat for like either this, like learning the piano reworkings, or like your solo music and stuff, do you have like a practice routine or anything like that?
Well, I suppose there are two different ones. This one I've just had to learn the songs on the piano and practice the piano, and sort of, I play a fair bit of keyboards here and there for other people, but it's a different role for that. You're coming into a record that's already done and you're sort of adding that in. But on this, I'm holding down all the chords, a lot of the melodies, things I have to sort of so I really had to learn and then play it and practice playing what I'd learned, and then also what worked. Then when I went and played with the others, I'm glad I hadn't done too much before that, because you had to change everything to fit in with that.
Yep.
And so that's been great. That's been a real challenge. But recently, the other rehearsal I did recently for something was just building this solo gig that I've done. It was very related to the acoustic Things of Stone Wood tour I did, but got using a stomp box and a tambourine on. Stomp box one foot, tambourine on the other foot, a harmony vocal, thing like that. Get ready to play a ukulele, all these things like that. And I actually went into a rehearsal room and just practiced that by myself to get there, or go and sort of see if it's how it's sounding. Go, it's sounding pretty big, and a few things just plugging things. Go, well, something's wrong.
Okay,
just a straight electrical problem.
Right.
So that was kind of interesting, but that was a really enjoyable thing to build up as well as an artist, to build something. Go, yeah, that's pretty big sound, and so I was really enjoying that. But I did notice just on the music thing, you doing solo gigs, you sort of burn out a lot faster. You sort of go, wow, that's really happening. That's really happening. A couple of months in, you sort of go, I kind of artistically feel like I've done that.
Okay,
and then you've sort of got to keep fired up for the shows that are left.
Yes. Yeah. So what do you do in that case where, it's towards the end of a tour and you're not as excited as you were at the start?
Well, that was interesting. I suppose this one's been such an interesting tour because the great thing about that was some of the last tours of this run, last shows within this run, were really lovely. They really went great. So that, that keeps me going, the reaction from people. So a fantastic show in Canberra, fantastic show in Adelaide. They're just really lovely, lovely shows. And that keeps my energy going for the thing. But also I think I'm coming to a era right now where I've sort of been touring almost for 2 years pretty straight, or definitely a year and a half. And it's just time to dial it back a bit and do something different, and keep that thing of it being fresh. It was really interesting when we did the acoustic tour with Justin, because we ended up doing about 50 shows with that tour. And it got to the point where, really unlike what I normally do, it became almost like a theatre show where just by doing it night after night, the lines you said started to become the same and things like that. And in the past, I would have always worried about that, going, oh, it's going to be, that's what you said last night.
Yes.
But funnily enough, in this one, I went, no, it's really working. And you could see it was communicating to people. And after a while, I thought, oh, this is like a show. And it never got tired. It never got old or tired to me. But a huge part of that is Justin, who's such an exciting musician, just that loose cannon, wild musician who kind of fires. And, I remember we were doing the last show of that tour and just go, there, off he goes again. It's thrilling what he's doing, and it's not what he did on the other nights. He's just getting into the zone. He's a fantastic intuitive musician in that way. And so the moment of the gig matters so much to him to be in that space where he can fire.
Yes.
And when he does, it's thrilling. You see it, it is for me, and you can just see it for the audience. They're like, oh my God, that's incredible.
Yeah. It is quite amazing how he seems to just embody the moment that's happening.
Yeah.
So easy to get caught up in your head thinking about like things like you're saying, like, oh, am I saying the same thing that I said yesterday, and which song's coming up next or whatever. But yeah, he seems to embody that exciting, just it's happening, and it's happening right now.
And I think it's a great chemistry. Like I can feel that when we did those acoustic shows ago. There's a really good chemistry. It's funny, it was in an era I hadn't played with Justin for some time, and he joined me for a few shows I was doing at a solo gig in Sydney. I remember just the second he got up and go, oh, that's right. That's amazing.
Yep. Wow. So when you were, you sort of mentioned how you play keys for some other people. I sort of wanted to ask you about, wearing the different hats where, Greg Arnold, you are your own musician and you put out your albums, but you're also the front man of Things in Stone and Wood. What's it like when you get to come in and do these other sessions, or, your work as a producer where, it's not you, but you're coming in to, assist or produce an album or just like, do a keys session. What's that like? And do you enjoy wearing the different hats?
I absolutely love it. So the session I did recently, it's one too where someone else is producing. Cameron McKenzie is producing the album. And that was great fun to get in there and go, well, I'm not thinking about that. We'll talk about things because that's how we talk to each other. But it's in general, I'm sort of there to sort of do that role. It was really fun to, become that person. And I had a period after Things of Stone would stop touring the first time, and I sort of, I want to understand that. I want to understand that role of musicians. I mean, fundamentally, I will always be a singer-songwriter. That's the angle I come at it. But I realised what I could bring to that table, because I'm actually not a very good keyboard player. Oh my God, I should have did that 2 nights before the keyboard show, should I?
I wouldn't say that.
It's an interesting thing to go, well, what I can bring is that singer-songwriter perspective to an instrumental part is actually kind of helpful to have around the place, someone who's everything's informed by the song.
Yeah.
And that's where I come from. So that's a really enjoyable. It goes from as far as that, where you're coming in and guesting on someone's track and things. But then it's a real continuum with producing. A lot of the time, I've spent a lot of the time over the last 10 years working on records where I've co-written a lot of the stuff. So that feels much closer to my own record when it's, so I'm producing it, but I'm also co-writing all the material. And that's a fantastically enjoyable project. I work with a guy called Carlisle Christopherson and he was another Aussie in Switzerland. We've made quite a few albums, and he brings ideas, we sort of workshop them up, we co-write everything, ends up being these albums, and it's really, really enjoyable thing. We're just about to start work on another one. And once again, it's sort of drawn to that Australian music thing because we were both sort of expats, so we looked at it different. I looked at it differently when I was in Switzerland to what I do now, and I enjoy getting back into that headspace of going when you sort of have this far more romantic take on Australian music when you're not here.
Yes.
And it's really lovely feeling.
Well, I guess, like, what's it been like now that you're back? Has, like, the romance faded after, a return and, doing the big tour here?
No, well, there was a fantastic homecoming to just get back in touch with being in Australia and being Australian. Everywhere we were going, wow. Yeah. I had the same feeling. I remember there's a song on the new album called The Hills of Johanna, and that is about the next Things of Stone and Wood album. And that is about basically how I went to Switzerland, and it's learning to live with a contradiction because I was loving everything I was seeing there. It's this wildly, ridiculously beautiful place. The only reason I knew our photos weren't photoshopped was because I don't know how to Photoshop. It was just like they look photoshopped. It's ridiculous.
Okay.
And then, and so I was just loving everything. But at the whole time, I was desperately homesick as well.
Yeah.
It's just living with this contradiction. It's a really heightened emotional state. So when we came back here, it was very similar. I was just loving everything and loving being home, loving all the Australian, the humour, all these Australian things. But then you sort of go, wow, I miss that amazing life in Switzerland as well. And it's just living with an emotional contradiction. It's actually creative.
Mm.
So I found it inspiring.
So I guess, like, why did you come back to Melbourne?
Well, we are very Melbourne people. I think described as a Melbourne cliche, aren't we? By the D generation. And I remember reading a street press one time, a review of a song we'd done, and it said, "This Melbourne band, this very Melbourne band," it's just released a song, and so I feel Melbourne's home for us.
Yep.
That's where all our family are. It's where the deepest of roots are for us, and so coming back here, we're very excited. We're very excited for our kids to come back and go to uni and live that life here in Melbourne.
Yeah, I was thinking about that video of, like, there's a parody video of the Things in Stone and Wood music video that Lucy showed me just the other day as I was getting ready for this. Yeah. And yeah, I don't think it had clicked with me just like how iconic you and your band were until I started talking to other people, and they were like, "Oh yeah, I love Things in Stone and Wood," or "Oh, Happy Birthday Helen," and it was just like, oh, if I've hit people over like a certain generational threshold of people that were listening to music in the 90s, it was such an iconic thing, and I don't know, it's just like I know you as Lucy's Uncle Greg, and not as the icon that you are. So it's sort of, I don't know, like it's been fun, I guess, getting to know you like in these two different ways, but then also like suddenly being like, oh yeah, it's not just Uncle Greg, it's Uncle Greg, the amazing singer-songwriter that has parody videos and, is mentioned throughout Australian media. It's like an interesting dichotomy and, these two versions of you that I've seen and got to know.
Well, I suppose it's, it's a kind of, I suppose particularly within the Melbourne thing, there has been this interesting story because there was the time before the band broke nationally. We had this whole life here for a couple of years before that, and that was just this really exciting time,
right?
And I think that's where so the film clip, it was a Sydney video maker, a guy called Paul Elliott, who sort of noticed this thing about the band and really wanted to capture that. He just loved like a Sydney person who loves Melbourne.
Okay,
so he caught all those things in the video that led to the parody of the thing. He's like, let's get there. And it was so much fun to make that. But I think it did capture that early stage of the band too, because obviously, it is interesting. We have a song like Happy Birthday Helen that does go to that other place.
Yes.
And so for the band, there was definitely kind of life before Happy Birthday Helen and life after Happy Birthday Helen. And it's forever changed, and it was a beautiful thing to have happened to the band. But we definitely... there's this whole other chapter here before that, whereas I think for my, people in other states, that was sort of where everything started.
Right. Yeah, so I guess like when you play the Melbourne shows, does it feel different because, you have, people from before Happy Birthday Helen that are still, into it?
Yeah, well, I remember having we played a house concert last year, I think, or the year before last. And I remember it was such a bizarre thing because there were people who'd not only been following the band at the Prince Pat, which was like our big residency that lasted for years, and people would come down, but people had been following the band since the Bendigo Hotel, which was like way before that. And I remember that was at that hotel we started doing a residency, and I remember just out of the blue, people started coming along to the shows who we didn't know. And it's like, wow, that actually happens, does it? That, it's not just because you've like hassled all my friends in the share house and all my family. You got to come to the show. And
wow.
People started coming, and then I remember they started coming to the point where, I remember this is magic. Go, whoa, 100 people came.
Wow.
We're like, wow, this is amazing.
Yeah.
And then there was a point at the Prince Pat where it just got, it just suddenly, it was just 300 people.
Wow.
Every night, every time we played there. It was this huge vibe.
That's incredible.
And that was before, before any single had come out or anything like that. So it was just like this great.
Oh, wow.
So for a while we were playing the SB one night and the Prince Pat the next, like Thursday, Friday night residencies.
Yep.
And it was just a great era to be a musician in Melbourne as well. It was really fun. And, people like Justin and Tony, they're doing lots of other shows as well. Mike, were doing this other little folk thing with our buddies from a band called Gentle Persuasion. And you're just doing a lot of stuff and living that full music world. And you could sort of live that way here in Melbourne.
Yep. Yeah, do you think, like, you've seen Melbourne and the industry change and, digital streaming and all of that has, like, quite changed, like, ways of making money in music with, like, hardly anyone sells albums anymore.
Yeah.
Do you think there's still that same, live music scene in Melbourne that's going on like that for younger artists?
Well, it's really, having lived in Geneva for 8 years, Melbourne is still a rockin' town for music. It's still, walking up and down High Street, Northcote, gigs everywhere, Sydney Road, Lygon Street. It's a big gig town. And it always has been like that. And it's exciting to see. I think, financially, I think it's just tougher. There was a sort of sweet spot where you could live a really good indie life. I remember working with a lot of artists in the early 2000s, and they were sort of making serious records and doing it all on themselves on indie budgets. Like I remember Karis Thompson, when I first started working with Karis, he was going around playing big shows all over the country and Europe, which he still does. And it was entirely indie thing, and it's just like a whole universe of living that. And that was sort of after the big John Butler waifs time, which really changed things up. And I always thought Things of Stonewood in some ways was that kind of spirit of a band, but we're a bit before that. We're so we got hooked into the megaverse of Sony, and with all its benefits, but with all its negatives as well. And it was kind of a different thing. But I sort of remember seeing those bands go, they've kind of got a similar spirit to it.
Yeah, interesting.
Well, particularly the early days of the band, and where you could just function on your own under your own steam, and it's great. So it is different now. The streaming thing. Well, the funny thing about streaming, I sort of love, there's things about it that are obviously rough, like the brutal exploitation of artists and the chance of ever plausibly seeing any money out of it is not a great thing to see. But having said that, it's sort of access is possible now, and I like the fact that, when I work with an artist like Carlisle Christopherson or my buddy Toby May in Switzerland, and we load the stuff up in there, and it's in the same format, exactly the same delivery system as the Beatles. I go, I kind of like that. It's not like there's a Spotify page for the Beatles and then everyone else gets their other kind of little crappy one. It's all the same medium, and it's it's very hard to get attention. Obviously, it's very hard to things have changed. I think ideas around the album have definitely changed since the single song download thing has become bigger. And for me, that's I love the narrative of an album, and I just go, I'm just an old codger in that space.
No, me too. I love listening to a whole album. I think my Spotify highlights called me, I don't know, like it gave everybody like a title of whatever you were, and I was an album enthusiast or something, because I just play through whole albums at a time, because like you, I like listening to the thing, whether it's a musical piece that the whole album's coming together like instrumentally, or a storytelling one with lyrics and stuff too. Like there's something special about a whole album, and like I like collecting records because you sit down and play a full album like that, and it's a whole experience. But whenever an artist is putting out an album on Spotify or another streaming service or something like that, like I still try and listen to the whole album.
Yeah, but it's good, and it reminds me too, I still really like, recently I realised how much it's harder to do that for new stuff nowadays, and it is good to be purposeful. For me, I think, let's say, for example, the album Punisher by Phoebe Bridgers, I just really got into that album.
Yes, great album.
And it's just like an album, it's a classic album. It's sort of got this spirit across the whole thing. A lot of diversity across the journey, but that's right. That will always be my favorite thing. So new things like that. I mean, for me, the biggest change in I remember seeing, it was in the late 90s, like the biggest cultural change in recording culture was I went out to a big studio one time and they just kitted out their studio and it had with this new digital tape machine, would have got hundreds of $1,000s to get this thing to update.
Okay.
And on this thing, I remember the engineer was doing things like editing on the tape and you could move things around a bit. And I was like, wow, what a new universe. This is incredible. This is like a big, serious.
Yeah.
And then I went round to my friend's place. I actually went to Cameron Mackenzie, the producer I was talking about earlier, to his place. And he was doing the same, only more elaborate stuff on a program he'd downloaded for free from the net. And I thought, well, this is going to have consequences. I can't see how that's not going to affect things. And sure enough, it did. It's just the thing of what you can make great records at home now and sort of be inventive, but you're not limited by it. Back in the day, you were limited by how you simply couldn't get your record as loud as the other, the big studios and things, the limited tape size. And it was just a challenge to get things to the same obvious level. You just weren't playing in the same space. Whereas now it's a lot more artistic judgment in just going, well, I can do this, I could do that, do it at home, I'll get it sounding at that same sort of level, and then off we go. And to me, it's a real, the risk of getting academic about it. It really is the means of production are in the hands of the workers. It's like this complete change of the dynamic there. You can go do this thing which used to be, it was just beyond the realms of possibility. Like when we were starting out, you sort of had to have that deal if you wanted to go make a serious record.
Yes.
Particularly, it depends styles. I mean, if you wanted to go make a punk record, which was totally a thing, they were sort of the vanguard of that indie rock thing, you could go do that. You could definitely make records, but it was limited. There was the gatekeeping happened at that point there.
Yep.
Whereas now I think the gatekeeping happens even less with record labels than it used to. I think I see they tend to respond if someone's got a bit of a buzz on them out on Spotify. Suddenly someone gets a lot of song plays or something, they'll look at that and go, what's going on there? Like an unusual buzz on something, of getting playlisted a lot. It's serious playlisting things.
Yes.
That will be what provokes interest now out in that space. So they've always probably been reactive to what's going on. I remember as clear as a bell, we were playing a lot and then suddenly people who didn't look like our audience and did look a lot like people from record companies started rocking up in the back of the room there.
Wow, that must have felt quite different. Seeing the suits walk in.
Well, I was definitely, I remember it as a real time, particularly, 'cause, a room full of hippies, if you're a record company executive, you will stand out a little bit in that.
Well, Greg, I thought just to bring the podcast to a close, that we could play a rapid fire question game.
Okay.
But before, I had this idea where we could play a game called Pass the Mic, where I would get you to ask a question for our next podcast guest, but you don't know who they are, and a little series can flow through where they can answer your question on the next podcast and ask a question for the next guest. Some examples could be, if you could collaborate with any artist, dead or alive, who would it be? Or something, to get the creative juices flowing.
Okay, so I would ask that of the next guest. Well, I guess I'd pick up on the theme of what we were talking about very early on there, is what is the thing that most emotionally connects you to a piece of music? What will be the feature of music? Will it be a blend of things? Will it be one specific thing? Some people at that point might go, lyric, got to have a good lyric. Some people might go, got to have a, cool groove or I'm out of here.
Yep. All right. Thank you. All right. Now, just first thing off the top of your head, what is the most recent album that you've played?
Punisher.
What is your favourite venue to play at in Melbourne?
Oh, tricky one. That throws, takes me past, present, future. It's a whole universe. I love playing. There is a beautiful feeling playing at the corner, like we did at that last show there. Sorry, I'm bad at the rapid fire thing. I go all PhD.
It is
on
fine.
On this. Yeah, I mean, so the Corner's a great rock venue. I will always have an incredible place in my heart for the Prince Pat Hotel, even though it hasn't been a venue for years. Just this perfect chapter of music in our life. So I suppose if I'd have to say a favourite Melbourne venue, I would have to go with the long-lost Prince Pat Hotel.
All right, well, what about your dream venue to play at?
I really want to play a show at the Recital Centre where we really put the heat on ourselves to deliver this. It's funny. I remember the band, we used to play in so many pubs, and then we started playing theatres. And I remember going, oh, my God, everyone can hear what I'm actually doing. Everyone actually hears every word I say. I'm going to go, oh, I have to make sense. It's good. So I would love to play there one time. I would love to do a pin drop kind of venue.
Yes. All right. What is your coffee order?
Such an embarrassing, not an embarrassing question, such an embarrassing answer. Lactose-free mocha. I can't believe I'm admitting that in public. But anyway, there you go.
One piece of advice that you'd give to your younger self?
Wow. Still be serious and committed to everything, but always try and enjoy things as well. Be serious, but don't take things too seriously.
Well, thanks so much for coming, Greg. I guess finally, where can listeners of the podcast listen to your music and connect with you if they want to, book you for shows or to, do some session work or produce their album? What's the best way?
You can either contact me via my website, Facebook. I get a lot of people just contact me on Facebook, which is a good thing. Via Things of Stone and Wood's website, Things of Stone and Wood's management.
Yep.
That's Greg Arnold land.
Thanks very much.
Great. Thanks for having me, Luke.
Thanks for joining us on Our Drummers Musicians. I hope you enjoyed getting to know another Melbourne muso like I did. Help us grow by leaving a review, share the podcast with friends and family, and subscribe on our website for extra info. Got a guest you'd love to hear on the show? Please let us know at ourdrummersmusicians.com. See you next time.